He was the main pillar of a 19-year NBA dynasty and quietly one of the best players to ever play the game. But without the intervention of Mother Nature, he might have never stepped on the court. This is the story of Tim Duncan. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to High Fiving Strangers. My name is Clint, and today we're going to get into one of my favorite players of all time, the big fundamental, Tim Duncan. I grew up about an hour outside of San Antonio, and in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was almost impossible to not be a Spurs fan in this area. And Tim Duncan was the perfect player for this city and this franchise. Now, full disclosure, I am a child of the 90s and my family doesn't watch basketball. So my first introduction to the NBA was actually Space Jam. So naturally, like every other kid on the face of the planet, my favorite player was Michael Jordan. But thanks to the Spurs Drug-Free Youth Basketball League, I learned that there was a team right up the road. And shout out to my childhood friend Andrew. When I was in elementary school, we moved into a new neighborhood and he invited me over. Him and his family were huge Spurs fans, and that's where I actually watched my first game. So if it wasn't for them, I don't even know if I'd be a fan. But this video isn't about my fandom, though I did choose this topic specifically because if I'm going to do my first Homer video, I want it to be a positive one before I get into the complete shit show that is the Cleveland Browns organization. Anyway, where were we? I guess we haven't even started yet. It's probably the fastest squirrel we've ever had on this channel. My bad, I'll get back on track. That's right, Tim Duncan. Duncan was born and raised in St. Croix on the Virgin Islands, and growing up wanted to be a swimmer just like his older sister, who actually competed in the 1988 Olympics. But in 1989, Hurricane Hugo devastated the island and took out the only Olympic swimming pool that they had. And since he was afraid of sharks and didn't want to swim in the ocean, he picked up basketball at the age of 14. Things like this are so crazy to me. Like, you hear stories all the time about people not picking up a sport until later and then just going on to be professional athletes. Like, he is arguably the greatest power forward to ever play the game, and if a hurricane didn't come through in the late 80s, he might have never played the game. Just a pure-born natural athlete. As a senior in high school, he averaged 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 blocks a game, got a scholarship, and went on to play at Wake Forest. When he got to college, he was still super raw on learning the game, so the initial plan was to redshirt him that freshman year, but one of his teammates had a recruiting violation, left the team and transferred to Michigan, forcing him into the starting lineup. Even though he wasn't the best offensive player, he immediately made an impact on the defensive end, averaging almost 10 rebounds a game and leading the ACC with 4 blocks per game as a freshman. By his sophomore year, his offensive game started to take shape, and he could have entered the draft and been a top prospect, but he made a promise to his dying mother that he would get a college degree. So he spent 4 years at Wake and graduated with a degree in psychology. In those 4 years in college, he made first team All-ACC 3 times, Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, ACC Player of the Year twice, first team All-American twice, National College Player of the Year in 1997, and basically every other award you can get in college, he got it. And as you can imagine, winning all of those awards comes with some crazy stats. All 4 years in college, he led the ACC in blocks, and 3 years he led the ACC in rebounds. And then in his senior year, he led the entire NCAA in points at 20.8, rebounds with 14.7, and blocks at 3.3, leading him to be the #1 overall pick in the 1997 NBA draft, being selected by the San Antonio Spurs, which has a little bit of controversy behind it. See, the Spurs were actually a pretty decent team at that time thanks to David Robinson, who they selected first overall 10 years before in 1987. But due to an injury, Robinson only played 6 games that year, leading them to have the 3rd worst record in the entire NBA. Many people thinking they shut him down all year on purpose so that they had a chance to get Duncan. See, the year before they finished 59-23 and made it to the Western Conference semifinals. But since I'm a fan, I'm going to say that's not true. We just got lucky. I know the league's no stranger to potentially rigging a draft to get somebody to go to a certain market, a la Patrick Ewing and the Knicks. But that year, the 76ers and the Celtics were also in the lottery. So why would they rig it to where this generational player went to small market San Antonio and not one of those 2 bigger teams? Though now that I think about it, 10 years before they did get Robinson, and a few years ago they did get Wemby, so maybe the league just likes to see big men in San Antonio? I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The Spurs drafted him. He's in San Antonio. Let's get into his career. In his second game against the Chicago Bulls and what some people say is one of the greatest rebounders of all time, Dennis Rodman, he pulled down 22 rebounds. And by the end of that rookie year, he averaged 21 points, 12 rebounds, 2.7 assists, and 2.5 blocks per game. Was named an All-Star, NBA All-First Team, NBA All-Second Team Defense, and won Rookie of the Year. The team also made it to the playoffs and won their first round matchup against the Suns, but lost in the next round against the Utah Jazz. The next year, he would solidify that rookie season was not a fluke and he was going to be a force to be reckoned with in the league for a very long time. They ended that season as the #1 overall seed, headed into the playoffs, and completely dominated. Only losing 2 games that entire playoff run and winning the franchise's first ever championship, beating the Knicks 3-1 in the finals. And in a conversation with Knicks head coach Jeff Van Gundy, Coach Popovich said, "Don't worry, I have Tim Duncan and you don't." I always get a good laugh when I look back and see scores from this time. Like look at the scores from this finals. They only broke 90 points once in the entire series, and 3 out of the 5 games the Knicks didn't even reach 80 points. Now compare that to the finals we just watched, where the Pacers averaged 107 points and the Thunder averaged 109. And during that 7-game series, each team only scored under 100 points once. Every score except for one in that series was under 90 points, and every score except for one was over 100 in this one. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit up here being an old man yelling at clouds saying that the NBA was so much better in the 90s and these players just couldn't hack it back in the day. No, it's just a totally different game. But being a fan of the Spurs during that era, I distinctly remember being like, holy shit, I can't believe they scored 100 points. And now it's just a default. And yes, 11-year-old me was saying things like, holy shit. You know, I was a rebel, sticking it to the man, you know, saying bad words and drinking Wild Island Boone's Farm and stealing my stepmom's cigarettes. You think I look like this because I had a normal childhood? No, dog, this is all trauma. Real emo kid shit. Okay, sorry, I squirreled again. Where were we? That's right, 1999 NBA Finals. Duncan dominated. Let's get back on track. He averaged 27 points and 14 rebounds and was named MVP of the finals, becoming the 3rd youngest player at the time to do so. What's funny, the 2 youngest players in front of him are both Magic Johnson. Though now he's actually 4th on the list because his teammate Kawhi Leonard won the award in 2014 and was a little bit younger than he was the first time he won it. The Spurs actually have 3 of the top 10 players on that list, with Tony Parker winning it at 25 years old in 2007. Maybe I should have put spoiler alert before listing all those, because now if people are watching this without any context of NBA history, they now know the Spurs won at least 2 more titles. Oh well. But to keep you intrigued and engaged, those were not the only titles won by the Spurs. Let's get into it. The next season, he continued to further cement his name as one of the best players in the league, but unfortunately, a few games before the playoffs, he injured his meniscus, causing him to miss the Spurs' first-round matchup against the Suns, which they would eventually lose. That offseason, Tim was a free agent and had conversations with Orlando about teaming up with Grant Hill and Penny Hardaway. But the deal was called off because apparently when asked, Doc Rivers told him that his family couldn't travel with the team to away games. It's crazy to think that that was the ultimate deal breaker. Like, I'm sure one of the things that stresses most teams out is when their young players go on the road, are they going to get in trouble? This dude is simply asking if his family can come on the plane with him so that he can be with them during the away games. And you said no. He's one of the best up-and-coming players in the NBA, and you said no to that? Huge mistake on Doc Rivers' part, and one of the ultimate what-if moments in the NBA. He would end up signing back with the Spurs, and then a year later in 2002 won his first MVP. And check out the fit he wore to go take real photos with the commissioner and the trophy. This is why we love Duncan. He doesn't give a shit about anything. He shows up to take official league photos with the commissioner and the MVP trophy, rocking jorts and sandals. Just a perfect example of his demeanor and personality. Then the following year, he would put together probably the best in his career, and if I'm allowed to be a homer, one of the best that's happened in any career. He would win his 2nd straight MVP that year, averaging 23 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 blocks. The Spurs ended that regular season with the best record in basketball and carried that momentum straight into the playoffs and to their 2nd title. Once they made it to the finals, he completely dominated, averaging 24 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, and 5 blocks per game, earning his 2nd finals MVP. 2 years later, Duncan and the Spurs would find themselves back in the finals, but this time matched up against reigning champions, the Detroit Pistons. It was a tough, hard-fought series that the Spurs would eventually win, and it's one of the only 2 times that they ever were forced to a Game 7 in their 6 finals appearances. Duncan would go on to win his 3rd finals MVP and become only the 4th player at that time to make that accomplishment, joining Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, and Shaquille O'Neal as the only players to win finals MVP 3 times. LeBron James would go on to join that list, but we're talking about the 2004-2005 season, and this was only his 2nd year in the league. So, at the time, those are the only people on the list. Then, 2 years later, again, they're back in the finals. This time they're matched up against LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, but they would make quick work of the Cavs, sweeping them 4-0. Though this is the title I mentioned before where Tony Parker would win that MVP, but Duncan still had awesome numbers, averaging 18 points and 11.5 rebounds per game. So to recap, we are only 10 years into his career and he has accomplished the following. He made 9 All-Star teams, 9 All-NBA first teams and 1 All-NBA second team, 7 All-NBA first team defense and 3 All-NBA second team defense, Rookie of the Year, 2 regular season MVPs, 3 Finals MVPs, and 4 NBA championships. Not too bad for a guy who wanted to be a professional swimmer and didn't start playing basketball until he was 14 years old. From 2008 to 2012, Duncan and the Spurs continued their quiet consistency, making the playoffs every single year, and even into his mid-30s, he was still a constant 20-10 threat. And during the 2010 and 2011, he became the franchise's leading point scorer, passing the Iceman, George Gervin. The narrative around Duncan and the Spurs was starting to change around this time, though, saying that he and the team were getting too old and that the dynasty was probably over. Popovich didn't help with that narrative, though, because at this time, he popularized the now hated load management, where you rest players they probably could and should play in to make sure you conserve their energy for the playoffs. He got a ton of backlash for it, and being the curmudgeonly jokester that he is, one of the games he actually did a DMP for Duncan, and the excuse was old. Tim Duncan and the Spurs dynasty was not over though, and in 2013 they made it back to the finals, facing the Heat and the Big Three. Vintage Duncan was back, leading the Spurs and averaging 19 points and 12 rebounds per game. But in Game 6, with a 3-2 series lead and Duncan on the bench, Ray Allen would hit a game-tying 3 off of an offensive rebound, sending the game into overtime. The Heat would go on to win that game and ultimately the title that year. The only time the Spurs would fail to win a title after making it to the finals. Spurs Twitter lost their mind after this game though, because a photoshopped image of Ray Allen actually stepping on the line started circulating, leading everyone to say that the conspiracy was in, that the league wanted the Heat to win and they were going to stop at nothing to make sure that happened. But upon reviewing the actual game footage, he was clearly behind the line and the shot was good, which sucks. They would get revenge that following season and play some of the most beautiful, pure team basketball you've ever seen in your life, taking the Heat down 4-1 and winning their 5th title. He would go on to play 2 more seasons and retire from basketball in 2016 after 19 years with the Spurs. During that time, he never missed the playoffs and won an astonishing 70% of the games he played in, racking up every possible award and accomplishment along the way and cementing himself as one of the best players to ever play the game. Shout out Tim Duncan, the big fundamental, and shout out you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, and let me know down below in the comments what team, player, or event you want to see me cover next. The best way to support the channel is buying some merch. And as always, get out there and high-five some strangers. Somebody blew up a condom and left it on my desk. That somebody is my wife.